Hey there, it's Dr. William Lee. I am physician, author, and scientist, and I'm actually doing this video series with my friends and colleagues, specifically like-minded doctors, to be able to have a conversation about the real experiences that we have with food and health, and really to kind of get the people who are watching and listening to this the feeling that they're just a fly on the wall, listening to friends talk about things that they care about. So I'm here today with my good friend and awesome fellow author, Dr. Will Bulsiewicz, the fiber fueled doc, who we developed our friendship a few years ago before you had your first book out. And I remember chatting with you about my experiences and just trying to share with you how what I encountered that was new, that I wished I had been prepared for, and then I watched you walk up to bat and swing it and hit like a home run the first time. So anyway, it's great to see you, Will. Do you want to talk about? Let's just talk about something we did recently. So I know you've been in the middle of a really big thing. What is that big thing?
Yeah. First of all, thank you for having me. It's exciting. I launched my second book, and it was interesting this time around. So going back to the first book, my first book was Fiber Fueled. You and I connected for the first time at effectively like a retreat,
Yeah.
and there were hundreds of people there. And yet, in this massive event, we found each other, and it was like an instant connection. And
I remember, by the way, it was like at the opening reception, and it was like you and I were like the two nerdy guys at the high school dance standing off in one corner, right? And everyone else was just doing their networky thing. And like there were just the two of us standing there, and they were like, why are we here?
yeah, yeah, I think we felt a little bit out of place, and we found each other. I like the high school analogy. I think it makes a lot of sense. And then next thing you know, we're like sitting at the same table enjoying breakfast together, and a relationship started there. You actually were quoted on the cover of my first book, and the book came out in May of 2020. And the thing about it is that in that position, there were zero expectations. It is a pandemic. My entire book launch campaign has been upended. I was supposed to fly out to LA and like do shows like Rich Roll, canceled. And it turned out really well, actually. Things went really well. I've since sold over 200,000 copies of Fiber Fueled.
Listen, I'm just telling you, like, for anybody listening to this, so I was quietly crossing my fingers and toes for you during your first book launch because the world was flying apart. Like no one knew what the heck was happening as the pandemic was unfolding, right? Remember, like TV was all about all the death and destruction, and no one knew exactly what was going on, and doctors, even the medical community, was fleeing from what was happening or struggling to just kind of stay afloat. And I thought, oh my gosh, my friend Will is going to be flying into this Category 5 hurricane. And little did I know,
You're in a triangle.
little did I know that you actually had like a supersonic jet that could fly through these clouds, and you came out very quickly on top. So what did that feel like? I mean, it must have felt really weird to be so successful. I mean, like you must have connected with people in a way that you're still connecting with people, even when all this other stuff was going on. It's like, what is it about you?
Well, I think there's a little bit of a story to this. So, effectively what happened, I was up actually, a lot of people have never heard this story before. I've never talked about this on a podcast. I was up in New York in early March, and I was recording a podcast with my friend Simon Hill from The Proof. It used to be called Plant Proof.
Right.
And so we record a podcast and we go out to dinner, and it was like the weekend that it all changed. We went out to dinner, and the next day I was supposed to meet my friend who's the chief spice mama on social media,
Right.
and Kanchan Koya, and I was supposed to meet her for breakfast. We canceled because it's like the world is ending. Like there is a pandemic in New York City. I come back to Charleston wearing an N95 mask in in LaGuardia Airport. Okay, I like flew up for just a weekend. I come back wearing an N95 mask. My practice is upended. All right, 50% of what we do is colonoscopy. Colonoscopy is shut down. We're not allowed to do it. So I'm sitting there in late March, and I'm like, my life is falling apart. I don't have the ability to make money for my family, and my book launch is a disaster. And after moping around for a couple of weeks, because I did do that, I did mope around for a couple of weeks. I got to a point where I was like, forget this. The moping does no good. Where are people? Because people still exist. In fact, if anything, people have more time because a lot of people aren't working right now.
Right.
Where are they? Well, they're not at Barnes and Noble anymore. Now they're on their phone. So I built my entire book launch around trying to connect to people.
You rebuilt it.
Yeah.
You rebuilt it.
Yeah, I had to pivot, and I went in a brand new direction, literally just in the last couple of weeks leading up to the book launch. It's like, new idea. Here's what I'm going to try. And I reached out to all these different people online personalities. And I said to them, my book launch has been destroyed. Is there any chance you'd be willing to support me and do an Instagram live? And I did an entire book launch from basically like a chair.
Like you were like, I mean, first of all, for anybody watching or listening, this story that you've just told me, Will, is like one of the ultimate stories I've heard about resilience, right? So here you were with perfectly good plans that were completely upended, and you thought about it. You didn't panic, but you thought about it and realized that it was time for you to figure out a new plan A. You leveraged what you believed were going to be necessary for you to be able, the resources to be able to fly, and you got in a cockpit and you took off and you flew. I mean, so this time, right? So this is the first book was called Fiber Fueled, which is about the gut microbiome and how amazingly empowered you can be yourself to be able to have better gut health. But this one is a cookbook based on the first one, right? So what's this one about?
Well, first of all, this book, I wholeheartedly believed in just as much as I did my first book. My first book was a passion project. And I view it as the first book is why you should care about gut health. This book is the how. It's actually so much more than a cookbook. If you go to Amazon reviews and you read them, this is what everyone says. They're like, this is way more than a cookbook. I was expecting recipes and I got a lot more. And so I knew that I had, going into the book launch, something special that no one had seen and they would not see until the book actually comes out. And what I did, Will, is I doubled down on the strategy that I used before. So I knew the way to connect with people is like, I want them to hear the story. That's podcasting.
Yeah.
And I want them to have live interactions with me in person. Like if you want to meet the author, I'll give you 100 opportunities. And you can do it from your living room in your PJs.
Right.
So
so these were the Instagrams that you did, IG lives.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
And the book came out, and you don't know what's going to happen, but there are expectations this time around. The first time was a surprise. This time it's more like people are expecting something. And the book came out, and during launch week, it sold 28,000 copies.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
And I thought I had a shot at number one on the New York Times. Now, here's the interesting thing about it. The book, Atomic Habits, is actually selling more copies in year 4 than it sold in year 1.
By the way, have you read that book?
I have not. I've heard great things about it though.
I have it in my library, and I got it because you know what? Actually, I would tell you it's worth reading because it's really about this idea that small things actually have big impacts, and that if you have a habit of doing a lot of little small things, you can actually reap a lot of the benefits from it. And I actually think that it's relevant to putting those action steps that you have in the fiber fueled cookbook, because basically what you have, what you've just launched is really a action guide, right? So the first one is the what, and this is the how. It's the action guide. And I think a lot of people wind up getting overwhelmed if unless they're really familiar with changing their lifestyle, but doing everything all at the same time. And one of the things that I'm a big believer on is like, just take one baby step
Totally.
that works for you, and you'll be rewarded with just that baby step. And that just shows you can take another baby step.
Oh, I so wholeheartedly agree with that actually. So if you go back to the very beginning for me, when I'm at my lowest point in my life and I need to figure out a way to dig myself out of this hole that I'm in, the transitional moment, and this literally happened. This is not just a story. This literally happened. I diverted away from Hardee's, which is where I typically went for dinner. I was in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. And at Hardee's for $5, you can get about 2,500 calories. They would give you a double cheeseburger, a chili cheese dog, fries, a beverage, and an apple pie. All right. For $5. And I diverted home. And the issue is I'm not a French trained chef. I needed something easy. So I pulled out a blender and I made a massive smoothie. And I felt so energized.
What made you do that though? What was going on in your head that said, you know what, I'm just gonna screw the Hardee's. I'm just gonna go for I'm gonna pull this stuff out and make it myself.
Well, this was the moment that was built up to. It's not like it happened overnight.
Okay.
During my medical training, you know how it goes. I was working 6 days a week, 15 hours a day, sometimes 30 hours in a row, many times without even eating.
Yeah. Right.
And
We were, by the way, the world's expert of time restricted feeding when we were
yeah,
training.
yeah. Well, and also it was a sleep deprivation lab.
And
So
sleep deprivation. Well, yeah, it's sort of like going against each other.
they're going against each other. And that's the issue is like, you actually put your body through a lot, even though
Yeah.
you're in your late 20s, early 30s. And unfortunately, ultra processed foods and fast foods, they fit so conveniently and perfectly. Cheap, quick, easy, tastes great. No denying that. It tastes good. And so it just fits so perfectly in my life. But there's a compromise that you make, which is that you compromise your health. It just takes years to show up. That's the problem. So there I was, and my health had been compromised. And I was quite miserable. I was 50 pounds overweight, was depressed, anxious.
50?
50.
Oh my gosh.
Seriously, I weighed 240. I weighed 240. Now I'm six
How
foot.
tall are you? How tall are you?
I'm 6'3", 6'4", so I'm a pretty
Okay.
tall guy, so I can hide it, but it was there. I could see it in the mirror when I'm looking.
And what
And
you can't see in the mirror is all that visceral fat that's encasing your organs.
oh, 100%. But my brothers are making comments about me when I go home for the holidays. I'm depressed, I'm anxious, I have high blood pressure and high cholesterol. And to be perfectly honest with you, I just wanted to curl up under a blanket in a dark room and be left alone. That's where I was at.
Wow. Wow.
And so I knew that something needed to change. And unfortunately, the scenario was that my medical training had not provided me with the tools in order to
Yeah.
do that. So I didn't want to take a pill, and I wasn't going to take a pill to fix my obesity, my overweight obesity issue. So I tried exercising my way out of this, and it failed. I did get stronger, swim further. And this was a very rigorous exercise program, by the way. I was pushing hard, and I could, get stronger and run farther and things like that. But I
Yeah.
could not fix these health issues.
Hmm.
And then what ended up happening, Will, is actually it's so bizarre that this is actually what happened, but this is true.
Okay. What is it?
I went on a first date with the person who is now my wife.
Okay.
All right, we have 3 kids together now. And by the way, that's the other thing that happened during the book launch is we had another baby. So
Ah,
I had a real baby
congratulations to you.
and a
Yeah.
book baby happened around the same time.
All right.
And well, so anyway, we're on a first date together in Carborough, North Carolina at a place called Acme. And I'm getting a pork chop. And she orders something that's not even on the menu. She says to the waiter, there's these sides. There's black eyed peas, there's collards, there's mashed potatoes, right? You can get your sides to accompany your meat dish. She says, can you put 3 or 4 of these onto a plate for me and just make it look nice?
Wow.
So I'm like, who are you? It's 2013. Who is this person? Early 2013. Who's this person that I'm sitting here with? I've never been around anyone like you in my life. This is weird.
Right. Well, first of all, again, really, really clever thinking, right? Because most people just follow, tick the boxes off a menu and order the appetizer and an entree or whatever it is. And here she is choosing something, as you say, that's on the menu, but not on the menu, and advocating for what she knew was going to be better for her.
So she looked amazing. Her health appeared to be completely aligned. She loved her food. She ate
Yeah.
until she was full.
Cool.
And when we were done, she wanted the date to keep going. And I felt compelled to go home because I was exhausted. And so this was not an intervention, unless this was like an intervention by God. This was though a seed that got planted in my brain, right? I noticed this and I ruminated on that. And then it was enough for me to say, maybe I should try that.
So that's how they define the better half, right?
Well,
like you were inspired, like it changed your mind, or you were maybe already on that threshold of knowing something needed to be done and you watched it being done right in front of your eyes, essentially.
it was a radical observation from my perspective because again, like I did not know a single person who was either vegetarian or vegan.
Right.
So to observe this, to be on a date with someone who is,
Okay.
and see it in real life, and you go, interesting. Maybe there's something there.
Right.
And that was all that I needed. She never once in my entire life, in the 10 years that my wife and I have been together, we met in 2012 for the first time. 2013 was this date. In the 10 years that we've been together, she's never once said, this is what you need to do in terms of your diet. But I changed because of her.
Well, she set the example, showed it could be done, made you think differently. And frankly, what a great kind of like little restaurant hack you just shared, which is, what, if you can't find something that you feel is like exactly what your body craves from a health perspective, just go off this is, by the way, this is what I actually do. Go off to the sides, the contorni or whatever it is, and pick a few of those little side things. They have some roasted Brussels sprouts or some, broccoli or whatever it is that like is cool, and just have them bring you the sides, like 3 sides as an entree or 2 sides as an entree kind of thing.
Exactly. So, and the thing is, going back to the atomic habits idea, this moment when I had this smoothie, I felt instantly energized. Instantly.
Really?
And there was a part of me that felt like almost like I have been deprived and now I am receiving what I need.
Can I ask you, what did you have in that smoothie? I want to know. I want to know what it was that actually turned on your lights with that smoothie. What would
I am not a recipe guy, which is bizarre because here I am with a cookbook, right?
Yeah.
What I am is I'm a chemist. I like throwing stuff in there and see
Okay.
what happens.
Do you
All
remember
right?
what you threw in there?
Yes. Bananas,
Okay.
berries, multiple types, frozen,
Okay.
and greens.
What kind of greens?
So I think it was like a big bunch of kale. Like
Okay.
I'm talking green kale and I'm ripping it off the stem and then just throwing it in there.
Cool.
All right. And then obviously liquid. And I think the liquid on that one was probably water because there's no way I had any sort of plant milk in my fridge. There's no way. So, and then some ice just to kind of give it the proper texture that I was
Yep.
looking for.
Sure.
And so, buzz that. And this thing was, I mean, I'm not kidding. It's definitely more than 30 ounces, probably 36 ounces. And it took me three, maybe three and a half large glasses to complete it. And I felt completely full,
Yeah. Right.
but I felt light and I felt energized. And I went normally after dinner for me back then, I would need to lay on the couch and just kind of decompress from dinner.
Yeah.
And I felt so energized that an hour later, I went to the gym and had a great workout. And this was, I think that the point from my perspective is this: it's not even like the energy level. What it is really truly was the juxtaposition of how I felt in that moment relative to how I felt prior to that moment.
Interesting. Yeah.
I For anyone who has suffered with these types of issues, you just want to feel well.
Right.
And I felt so much better.
So, like, I mean, and look, I mean, we're both doctors. And so, uh, the whole idea about an individual patient that we might be seeing, when there's a difference in their life, something's made a difference. Like that's it instantly is something that they are able to recognize and talk about. And so what you're just kind of sharing with me is sort of your side of the white coat kind of thing, where like you were feeling one way and then you tried something different and you felt completely different. And so the, so I mean, obviously that inspired you to dive deeper into doing all the things you've done. Has it changed the way that you were talking to patients as well?
So, first of all, this is perhaps an N of one thing, right? And we may want population data to back up what we do. And part of what happened here was I had my N of one moment, and then I turned to the data. And this is where I discovered the relationship between dietary fiber and the gut microbiome.
Did you know anything about the microbiome before
I did
that?
not. I did
Really?
not. And in
Okay.
fact, I trained with some of the leading, if you go to a microbiome meeting, you're going to hear one of the most brilliant people is Belfer Sarter. And
He trained you?
I was in his clinic
Okay.
treating inflammatory bowel disease for years.
But he never told you about the microbiome.
It wasn't a focus, right?
Okay.
Because we're not talking about these nebulous ideas of the microbiome back
Right.
in 2010,
Right.
2011,
Right. Right.
right? We're talking about biologics, right? And inflammatory bowel disease. These are biologics, by the way, for people who are wondering. I'm talking about like very, very powerful anti-inflammatory drugs. So, uh, but that's, I think, part of what happened is this inspired me to say, how come I haven't been taught this? And
Interesting.
to find the confirmation of how I felt as a single individual person in a overwhelming body of evidence that exists that I had not been taught in my medical training, despite being at these great institutions and having great mentors. Um, it made me understand that we can't allow ourselves to remain within the box
Right.
of conventional medicine.
Well, and like for me, it was a little bit different. Um, I never had a problem with my weight. But for me, I got thrown into my interest in food and health before I went to medical school. I did a gap year and I went to the Mediterranean and I lived there. And by the way, I just came back from there a few days ago, doing research for my next book. And when I was there at the very beginning, before med school, what I was so interested in is how is it that some people live to eat as opposed to eating to live? Like the idea that you just kind of sit down and wolf your food down, get your calories in, and keep on doing your stuff
Right.
like that. That's eating in order to survive.
Isn't that kind of an American thing, don't you think?
I think that anybody who is used to breaking bricks, like in a slag heap, I think
Right.
that's the mindset you have. Like you have a foreman who's whipping you, and it's not a pleasant way of living. And then, when I really embedded myself in Italy and in Greece and started to see how people were living, and then I went to Asia, what I saw was that people are excited about their food. Like when you just talked about your smoothie, your blender, and you were talking about the berries and the bananas, like you can see the passion in your eyes as you're recounting something. That's what happens in these countries that I just got back from Greece. Every time you sit down with anybody over a meal, their eyes light up when they start talking about their food. And it's something that, I really believe is really important. Uh, and one of the things that by the way, I just sort of tearing a page from your playbook is this idea that I was doing research, looking at something that most people who are doing healthy eating don't spend a lot of time doing. That's why I did it. Plant-based foods, dietary fiber, absolutely important. I wanted to take a little bit of time to research something that most people don't think about for lots of reasons, which is seafood.
Mm.
Most of the data shows that people who eat seafood in moderation actually have better health outcomes. And I was so curious about like why that is and what about the omega 3s. And so I sat down and I looked at everything on the menu and, and to try different components of it. And one of the things I didn't realize for omega 3s, which of course you can get from plants through ALA, um, is that almost all the seafood, not just the greasy ones, actually, the oily ones actually have omega 3s. But one of the things that eating seafood doesn't give you is plant-based food. So when I sat down at a taverna and I was in Greece and I wound up looking at how to build my meal, what did I do? I went to the appetizers and the vegetables, and I did exactly what your significant other did back then. I went and put together, like I wanted to try some seafood stuff, but I put together a meal of Santorini and giant fava beans. I put together a meal of volcanic tomatoes with mint. I put together a meal with wild greens, salad greens that are basically harvested from the hills. You got to have a little trust that, like this is in the middle of the Mediterranean, so it's pretty healthy. The air is like 1,000 feet above the sea. They wash them up, they saute them with a little garlic, a little shallot. And it was so great. Like when they were bringing out the meals, like I kind of felt like you, which is, I was hungry. And yeah, like if somebody put a burger in front of me, I mean, I don't normally eat burgers, but I probably could have eaten one because I was pretty hungry. But just eating that healthy food in a healthy environment and then listening to the people talking about the food, because I would always ask people about what they were eating and where it came from and how do they prepare it, was just like an elevating type of experience. So